In this lesson, we're going to look at Lambda functions and return statements in Python. So by the end of the video, you'll be able to understand what return does and why it is crucial in Python. We're going to write functions that return values like you've done before. And you're also going to understand what Lambda functions are and when and where to use them in Python. So the first thing you need to understand is what is return. We've sort of used a return statement before, and what we're going to do is we're going to write a simple function here first. So we're going to write a simple function. I'll call it something like get greeting, and I'm not going to give it any parameter, but it's going to return a statement. So we're going to use the return function here, return, and we're going to give it a statement like hello because it is a greeting. So this is how we've interacted with return statements. And we've talked about how the difference between a return and a print statement, and how return basically still holds the value in the function and it doesn't terminate a function after its execution. But to just understand return statements further, return statement or return keyword is how far a function gives back a result after it has done its job. So without the return keyword, the return statement, a function might do something like printing something out, but it will not give you a value that you can reuse later on. So the core objective of a function is that a function is reusable, and a function needs to return something that we need at the end of the day. So for example, if you write a function that goes through the scores of students in an exam, and it returns to you who the top student is, that is a function that you can reuse every time students do exams if you're a teacher. The other thing, how you can think about print statement is that you write a function that only prints out the student or the leading student who has scored the highest in your exams, but that is basically it, and you have to sort of write another function for the next examination. We get the point here. So with this return, the function produces something that can be stored and used again, or even passed into another function. We've seen how you can be able to do this multiple times. But what you see here, this is a greeting, a function for greeting that uses the return keyword. What you were using before we even introduced return is, let's say I write a function here. In this function, it's going to just print a statement, and this one is just going to print. It's going to print hello, and we'll have hello there. So this is the difference. The print one is you cannot be able to reuse this value that it prints, right? So that's why we say once it has been executed, it gets terminated. It's no longer useful to us. But this one that returns the value, it means that the function still holds the value and you can reuse this value. What we've mentioned is that this value can be stored, right? So what you can do here is you can call this function get underscore greeting. You can call this function get underscore greeting, and the value that it returns, it can be stored somewhere. So let's say I can call it like greet underscore var, like that's the name of the variable. So with this we're able to store the value that it returns, and we can reuse this value many times over as we'd like to. But that cannot happen with when you're using a print statement. So I believe that point is home already. Now let's try and we're going to print this greet val. So we're going to just print greet underscore var, the variable, and we'll run our code. I called this file that we're using, I call it lambda functions.py. And as you can see here, it prints hello. So it prints this hello. The reason this first one is not printing is because we haven't called that function yet. So let's call that function as well. So we'll call say hello. So on this one, we don't need to say it anywhere because it doesn't return a value. So we have two hellos here. Now let's try to store this somewhere. So I'll just call maybe a variable. I'll call it. Let me call a variable like statement. Uh, okay, I'll just call it state instead of just overthinking about it. Then we're going to try and print state. Okay, so if we run this, you see we get none, right? So we're getting none here because this variable state doesn't, or rather the say hello function does not return anything. So it's like we're storing a value of none, or we're not storing anything to the variable state. That's why we're getting none. So I believe this at this point you understand what we mean by the difference between the return keyword and using a print statement here. So that is basically it on how we can understand a return keyword, and there are many other ways that we can use return. For example, we've seen how you can write a function that adds two values and then it returns the sum. That is a case where you can use the return keyword because you can store and reuse and manipulate that value later. And you can go ahead and try using the return keyword with the challenge that we did before on the finding the square of a number, writing a function that returns the square of a number. You can also use the return on that. Now to understand the return keyword and its usability, let's move on to Lambda functions. So Lambda functions. Now, what are Lambda functions? So think of it like this. At some point, when you're writing your code, you're going to need a small function that you can use only once, right? So there are certain scenarios where you require such a thing. You require something that is simple and something that is quick. That is where Lambda functions come in. A Lambda function is a quick and throwaway function that has no name. I'll actually just write this here for you. So I'll just say this is a quick throwaway. This is a quick throwaway function with no name. This is ideally what a Lambda function is. So let's first of all write what a standard function would look like. So let's say we write a standard function that doubles the value of a number. We're going to call this function double. It takes in a parameter like x, and it returns the double of that number. So it doubles up the number. So return, and it's going to return x multiplied by 2. Of course, that's the double. So in this case, this is what you have at this function. These are the standard function would look like that. The Lambda version of this function looks like this. So I'll just call here Lambda. Okay, we'll understand. It isn't for me to add. Actually, I'll just write the comment. Lambda version. So the Lambda version of such a function would look like this. You're going to declare a variable called double, and in this case you use the Lambda keyword. So we're going to use Lambda like that, and you're going to give it x. So x like that, and then you just say x multiplied, use asterisk sign again, by 2 like this. Then what you can do next is you can go ahead and print the double. So you can print the double, and you're going to pass in the parameter, the value that you want to double. In this case, let's say you want to double a value like 4. So if you do this, and let's try to sort of, we have a new double. Okay, yeah, the reason we're getting this is because you already have a double before here. So this function, I'll call this double one. Let me call it double one. That way we don't have to sort of confuse about it. So let's clear this up and run. So when we run this, you see we get 8. 8 is the result that we get from this. This is the Lambda version. So you can see the difference between the two. The difference is that with the Lambda, you can write a one-liner function. You can just easy, quick to use, and you just forget about it after. So again, you just use Lambda, then you pass in this x is like saying the parameter, then it goes ahead and doubles up that value. And that is basically it. Again, the simple syntax is you have Lambda as the keyword, then you pass in the arguments and the expression. So x times 2 is the expression, and you can assign these variables as many as you want. So in this case, let's say it required. Actually, let's create a different Lambda function. So we have a Lambda function called add. Then we store the value to add, that is. So we're going to have Lambda, and it's going to take in two values, a and b. Then those are the arguments. The expression here is going to be a plus b, because that is how you calculate the sum. To get the result of that, we'll just say print let's do print add, and we pass in the argument. So a and b will give it a value like 2 and 4. Now if we run this, you see we get 6 as the result, because this is how a Lambda function works. So that is basically how you can understand Lambda functions. You can go and stretch and extend this further as a challenge actually. We've done the square of a number. You can write a Lambda function. I'll just write it here as a challenge for you, to just try and confirm that you've understood everything here. You just say write a Lambda function that returns the square of a number. So write a Lambda function that returns the square of a number. Try it out. I'm not going to show you how you can write this, but again, just use what you've done here. It's super easy at this point, I believe, to use that. And there are a number of common use cases of lambdas now. So a common use case of lambdas is we have a function known as a map function that we usually use. So in a map function, you can apply a function that every element of a list can use. But we're going to just hold off this for now, so that we can look at it later when we have understood what lists are and how to use lists. So that is basically it for the Lambda functions. Go ahead and try them out. If this helped you understand return and Lambda functions, please drop a like and hit subscribe to help support and make sure that this sort of content reaches as many people as possible who might find it helpful. Okay, cheers, and I'll see you in the next one.